Every destiny begins with a choice. For some, that choice is made in the dust, under the heavy hand of betrayal. She came to the city for a promise of light. But all she found was the darkness of a forced life. Then, just as the darkness consumed her, a moment that changes everything. Crash. A waking in a sterile world. And a hand. The hand of the man who stopped. The sun rose over the red roofs of Okuru village, spilling gold and fire across the morning sky. Roosters crowed, women called to one another at the stream, and the smell of burning firewood drifted through the air. Amid that morning music, a 16-year-old girl hurried down a narrow path, a bundle of firewood perfectly balanced on her head. Her name was Layla, and her dreams were far too big for the village she called home. Each dawn, before the first cock crowed, Layla fetched water, helped her mother tend their small garden, and sold vegetables at the market. But at night, under the weak glow of a kerosene lantern, she whispered to herself, "One day I'll wear a school uniform. One day I'll make Mama proud." Her mother, Mama Ifeoma, would smile from her mat, hiding the ache in her eyes. "My daughter," she'd murmur, "you were born for more than this soil. But we must wait for God's time." Layla's father had died when she was 10, leaving behind debts and silence. Mama Ifeoma had promised that her daughter would go to school someday, but poverty was a stubborn shadow. Still, Layla believed. Then, one dusty afternoon, the wind of change arrived in the form of a silver Toyota Corolla, gliding into the village and raising a trail of red dust. Children ran after it, shouting, "Auntie Clementina Dawn, come o." Women peeked from their huts, adjusting their wrappers, whispering with envy and admiration. Layla stood by the doorway, her heart drumming. Auntie Clementina, Mama Ifeoma's only sister, was everything the village wasn't. She lived in Lagos, wore gold earrings that caught the sun, and spoke with the confidence of someone who had seen the world. When Clementina stepped out of the car, the compound came alive. She hugged her sister loudly, laughing for everyone to hear. "Ifeoma, my God, look at you. Still living in this place," she said, her perfume cutting through the smell of smoke. Layla curtsied shyly. "Good afternoon, Ma." Clementina's eyes traveled from Layla's bare feet to her innocent smile. "So this is Layla? My niece has grown into a fine young woman." She smiled, the kind that glimmered with both warmth and calculation. That evening, stories filled the air. Clementina spoke of Lagos, of tall buildings, shining lights, and supermarkets larger than churches. Layla sat at her feet, eyes wide with wonder. "Auntie, is it true that girls in Lagos go to school every day?" Clementina laughed, patting her head. "Of course. In fact, that's why I came. Ifeoma, I want to take Layla with me. I'll enroll her in a good school. Let her get the education she deserves." The words fell like rain on parched earth. Mama Ifeoma froze. "You mean it? I can't let my niece waste away in this village." Clementina said smoothly, "Let her come. I'll treat her like my own daughter." That night, Mama Ifeoma didn't sleep. She watched her daughter fold her few clothes into an old nylon bag, each fold a silent prayer. "My daughter," she whispered, "you're going to a better place. Don't forget your prayers. Be humble. And never forget home." Layla hugged her tightly. "Mama, I'll make you proud. I promise." By dawn, the whole village had gathered to send her off. Women sang blessings, men nodded in approval, and children danced barefoot in the red dust. As the car engine roared, Layla leaned out the window, eyes glistening. Her mother stood still, waving both hands, smiling through her tears. As the village disappeared behind the hills, Layla felt hope bloom in her chest. The world ahead was vast and new. Wide roads, tall buildings, faces rushing past. She whispered, "Thank you, God. My new life has begun." But Clementina's smile had changed. The sweetness of her village laughter was gone. She drove in silence, her lips tight. When Layla tried to speak, she only said, "You'll see your new school soon. Be patient." Hours later, the car stopped before a tall, gated house with flower pots by the door and glass windows that sparkled. Layla gasped, "Auntie, your house is beautiful." Clementina didn't reply. She called out, "Vivian, come and greet your cousin." A slim girl about Layla's age appeared, wearing a crisp school uniform. Her eyes swept over Layla's worn dress. "So this is the village girl," she muttered. "Yes," Clementina said with a small laugh. "From now on, she'll stay with us." "Good afternoon," Layla said politely. Vivian shrugged and walked away. Clementina pointed toward a small door beside the kitchen. "You'll sleep there. Wake early. There's plenty to do. Layla blinked. A lot to do. You're not in the village anymore, Clementina snapped. Wash, clean, help out. Once you've settled, we'll talk about school. Layla's heart dropped. But, Auntie, you said. I said what I said. Clementina cut in, turning away. Now, go and rest.
And wake
Tomorrow
up
we'll
early
be busy.
tomorrow.
That night, Layla lay on a thin mat in the corner of a small, airless room. She heard Vivian's laughter echo from the living room, the clinking of plates, the hum of the television. All the sounds of the life she thought she'd come to share. Her dreams, once bright as the Lagos skyline, dimmed into shadows. Still, she whispered, maybe this is how it starts. Maybe Auntie just needs time. But a smaller voice within whispered back, Layla, tomorrow has already been promised to someone else. Outside, the city lights flickered. Inside, Layla closed her eyes, clutching her hope like a fading candle, unaware that the promise that brought her to Lagos was already turning into her prison. The city never slept, but Layla did not dream. Every morning, she woke before dawn to the sharp voice of her aunt echoing down the corridor. Layla. The clothes won't wash themselves. She would stumble from her mat, her hands already blistered from the day before. The scent of soap, smoke, and exhaustion clung to her skin. The Lagos sky, once full of promise, now looked gray and distant, like freedom seen through glass. Weeks passed, then months. The talk of school never came again. Instead, Layla's days were filled with buckets, basins, and street dust. She cleaned, cooked, and fetched water while Vivian, her cousin, swept past in starched uniforms and polished shoes, heading to school with a smirk. Village girl, Vivian would sneer, eating her breakfast. You came to Lagos to wash plates, not to learn. Layla swallowed her shame in silence. Every time she bent to scrub the floor, she whispered the same prayer. God, please don't forget me. But the city was unkind. Even God seemed far away. Soon, Clementina began sending her out to hawk sachet water. You can't just eat my food for free, she'd say, thrusting a tray into her hands. Go and sell before the sun goes down. If you lose 1 naira, don't come back. Layla would walk the hot streets barefoot, balancing her tray, shouting pure water. Cold pure water. Her voice cracked, her lips dry from the heat. Sometimes, kind strangers would give her extra coins. Other times, men whistled or laughed at her dust-streaked face. But she kept walking, her mother's voice echoing faintly in her heart. Be humble. Don't forget who you are. One afternoon, the clouds hung heavy and the air smelled of rain. Layla had sold only half her water, but the streets were growing rougher as evening fell. She quickened her pace through a narrow alley. And then it happened. 3 boys stepped out from the shadows. Their eyes glinted like knives. Fine girl, where you day go. One of them jeered. Layla froze. Please, I just want to go home. Before she could finish, they snatched her tray. The bottles scattered, bursting open like tiny explosions. When she tried to run, one pushed her hard. She fell to the ground, her elbow scraping the concrete. The boys grabbed the small bag of money tied around her waist and vanished into the chaos. For a long moment, Layla just sat there, trembling. The sound of traffic roared in her ears like thunder. She looked at her empty tray, then at the coins rolling into the gutter. How will I go home? Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled into the road, calling after them. But the world was moving too fast. A blinding light. A horn blaring. Then, impact. Everything went dark. When she woke, the world smelled of antiseptic and bleach. She was in a hospital, her head bandaged, her arm in a sling. A strange man sat beside her. Young, well-dressed, his eyes kind but troubled. Don't be afraid, he said softly. You were hit by my car. My name is Raymond. You're safe now. Layla tried to sit up, wincing. My tray, the money. Auntie will kill me. Raymond shook his head. Forget that for now. You need rest. For the first time in months, someone spoke to her gently. She blinked back tears. Thank you, sir. He smiled faintly. Just get better. Days passed, and Raymond paid every hospital bill. When she could finally walk again, he arranged for his driver to take her home. I'll make sure your aunt knows you weren't to blame, he said. Layla nodded, clutching the envelope he gave her. But dread settled in her stomach as the car neared Clementina's house. The moment they arrived, her aunt stormed out, her face twisted in fury. So this is where you've been? Following men now? Clementina screamed, her voice echoing across the street. You useless girl? You think Lagos is for prostitutes? Raymond stepped out quickly. Madam, that's not true. She was. But before he could finish, Clementina shoved him aside and slapped Layla across the face. The sound cracked through the air. Neighbors peeked from their windows. You bring shame to my house. Clementina yelled. Get inside. Raymond stood frozen, disbelief and anger burning in his eyes. You can't treat her like this, he said. Who are you to tell me what to do in my own house? Clementina snapped. She poured a bucket of dirty water toward him, splashing his shoes. Leave here before I call the police. He turned to Layla, his voice low. I'll come back tomorrow. But that night, Layla sat on the floor of her small room, holding her bruised cheek. The envelope of money lay torn beside her, the notes scattered and trampled. Her heart ached, not just from the beating, but from the truth she could no longer deny. The dream was dead. She whispered into the darkness, her voice cracking. Mama, I want to come home. Outside, thunder rolled over Lagos. The rain began to fall, washing the city clean. But not her pain. The next morning broke gray and heavy. Layla's body ached, but her heart hurt more. She sat by the small window, watching raindrops snake down the glass. Vivian's laughter drifted from the living room. Sharp, distant, cruel. Then came a knock at the gate. Clementina opened it, her wrapper half-tied, her irritation ready. It was Raymond, dressed neatly, holding a small nylon bag. Good morning, he said quietly. I came to check on Layla. Clementina's lips thinned. You again? What is it you want from her? I just want to be sure she's fine, he said calmly. She gave a short, scornful laugh. Fine? You people from the city. You think everyone's desperate for your charity. Before he could answer, she splashed the dirty water from a bucket near her feet, the puddle spraying his shoes. Get out. Before I call the police. Raymond's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed low. You'll regret treating her this way, he said, then turned and walked into the rain. Layla watched from the window, trembling. She wanted to run after him, to scream, to beg him not to go. But her legs felt nailed to the floor. That night, the heavens opened again. The rain fell in sheets, loud and cold. Clementina burst into Layla's small room without warning, fury twisting her face. So that's your plan, Abai? Bringing strange men to my house? Layla jumped to her feet. Auntie, no. He was just... Liar. Clementina shouted, grabbing her bag from under the bed. Get out of my house. Layla's eyes widened. But it's raining. I said G-E-T-O-U-T. She threw the bag at her, yanked open the door, and pushed her into the storm. Layla stumbled into the street, rain pounding her head, her wrapper plastered to her skin. Behind her, the gate slammed shut with finality. She walked aimlessly, sobbing, until the city lights blurred, her feet splashed through puddles. Her teeth chattered from the cold. Every step felt like a punishment. By dawn, she reached a small, dimly lit park. Her hair was soaked, her face streaked with tears. She sank onto a wooden bench, clutching her bag. An old woman sitting nearby looked at her kindly. My daughter, why are you here alone in this rain? Layla wiped her face weakly. I just want to go home. To Okuru village. The woman studied her for a moment, then opened her wrapper and pulled out a few naira notes. Take this, she said softly. It's not much, but it will get you home. Layla blinked in disbelief. Mama, I can't. Don't argue, the woman interrupted gently. Sometimes God uses strangers to send help. Layla took the money, her hands shaking. Thank you, Mama. I won't forget this. The woman smiled faintly. Just don't lose your faith. The road to Okuru was long. By the time the bus reached the familiar red earth, the sun was rising. Layla stepped down, her heart pounding. She hurried straight home, her feet sinking into the wet soil. The compound looked smaller, older, almost lifeless. Mama, she called. From inside, a frail voice answered. Layla? Layla rushed in and froze. Mama Ifioma sat on a mat, coughing, her frame thin and weak. Layla dropped her bag and knelt beside her. Mama, why didn't you tell me you were sick? Her mother smiled faintly, her voice hoarse. I told your aunt. I thought she would tell you. Layla's eyes filled with tears. Auntie never said anything. She made me her servant, Mama. I washed, scrubbed, starved. She lied about school. Her voice broke. She buried her face in her mother's lap and wept. Mama Ifioma stroked her hair weakly. Hush, my child. You're home now. That's what matters. Layla lifted her head, her tears mixing with her mother's. I should never have gone. Her mother shook her head slowly. No, my daughter. Everything that happens, happens for a reason. You'll see. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Raymond searched for her. He asked neighbors, checked hospitals, and visited the motor park. No one knew where she'd gone. Until a driver said, I think that girl took the first morning bus to Okuru. Raymond didn't waste time. He packed a small bag and began the long drive east. A week later, Okuru was silent. Mama Ifeoma had lost her battle with sickness. Layla buried her face in the pillow that still smelled like her mother, crying until her body ached. The villagers helped her prepare for the burial, their faces full of pity. On the 7th day, the mourners gathered under the mango tree. Women sang soft dirges, men dug the red earth. Layla stood by the grave, her eyes hollow. As the priest prayed, a black SUV stopped quietly at the edge of the crowd. Raymond stepped out, dressed in white. No one recognized him, but his eyes searched for Layla. When the service ended, and the last handful of soil covered the grave, Layla knelt and whispered, Rest well, Mama. I'll make you proud, no matter what it takes. As she stood, wiping her face, she turned and froze. Raymond stood behind the mourners, his face solemn. She blinked in disbelief. Raymond. He nodded once. I heard what happened. I've been looking for you. Her voice trembled. She threw me out. She lied about everything. He took a step closer, his tone gentle. You don't have to face this alone anymore. Layla's lips quivered. I've lost everything. He shook his head softly. No, you still have your strength. And your promise to your mother. Let me help you keep it. He stretched out his hand. Layla hesitated, then placed her palm in his. As the last light of evening bathed the village in gold, they stood beside the fresh mound of earth. The wind carried the scent of rain and hope. And though the world had broken her, Layla finally felt something she hadn't in a long time. A new beginning stirring quietly within her chest. The morning after her mother's burial, the sky over Okuru was pale and quiet, like the village itself was holding its breath. Smoke from nearby cooking fires curled into the air, blending with the scent of wet soil and sorrow. Layla sat on the low wooden bench outside the hut, her eyes swollen from tears and her mother's wrapper draped over her shoulders like a fragile shield. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face. The gentle smile, the fading voice whispering blessings, the stillness that came after. The silence of death had its own sound, and it haunted her. From the distance came the rumble of a car. The same black SUV she'd seen at the burial stopped near the gate. The door opened, and Raymond stepped out, carrying a small basket of food and bottled water. Layla stood slowly. You came back. He nodded, his voice quiet. I couldn't just leave. You've been through too much to face it all alone. She looked away, blinking hard. I don't even know what to do now. Everything I lived for is gone. Raymond set the basket down on the bench. Maybe not everything. You still have her prayers. And your dream. Layla's lips trembled. Dreams don't survive in places like this. He met her eyes gently. They do. When someone believes again. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of the wind through the palm trees filled the space between them. Then, quietly, Layla said, she wanted me to go to school. Even when we had nothing, she never stopped believing I could. Then, let me help you make that happen, Raymond said. Not out of pity, but because I know what it's like to want more from life. She hesitated, fear and pride warring inside her. Why me? You barely know me. He smiled faintly. Because when I met you, you were fighting for your future even when everything was against you. That kind of courage shouldn't die. Tears filled her eyes again. Soft, slow, cleansing. She nodded once. That afternoon, the villagers gathered as Raymond's car rolled down the dusty road once more. They whispered among themselves, wondering who the young man was and why the poor widow's daughter was sitting beside him. Layla kept her gaze ahead. The road stretched like a ribbon of red clay in memory. Behind her lay her mother's grave, the home that held her laughter and tears. Ahead was everything unknown. Halfway through the journey, she turned to Raymond. Do you really think I can start again? He looked at her for a moment before answering, You already have. Lagos was different this time. The same city that once felt like a cage now looked alive. A place of second chances. Raymond drove her to a small, neat apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It's not much, he said, opening the door, but it's yours for now. You'll start school next term. I've already spoken to a few people who can help. Layla stood in the doorway, her heart pounding. The walls were white, the curtains light blue, the air smelling faintly of paint and new beginnings. She touched the edge of the table, as if to be sure it was real. "Raymond," she whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." He smiled softly. "You don't have to. Just live the life your mother dreamed for you." For the first time in months, Layla slept without fear. No shouting. No chores waiting before dawn. Only silence and peace. Days turned to weeks. Layla began school again, sitting among students who had no idea what she had endured. At first, she felt out of place. Her accent different, her clothes simple. But with every lesson, every book she opened, she felt her mother's voice echo. "You were born for more than this soil." Raymond checked on her often, never intruding, always encouraging. He brought her books, asked about her grades, and treated her with a kindness that never felt like charity. One evening, as they sat outside her apartment, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance, Layla said quietly, "Do you ever wonder why people like Auntie Clementina do what they do?" Raymond thought for a moment. Sometimes pain turns people cruel, but kindness turns pain into purpose. She nodded slowly. "Then maybe my purpose is to make sure no one else goes through what I did." He smiled. "That sounds like the beginning of something beautiful." Years passed quietly. Layla finished secondary school, then university. She grew into the woman her mother prayed she'd become. Graceful, wise, unbreakable. And through it all, Raymond was there. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting Lagos gold, he stood beside her on a balcony. "Layla," he said softly, "I think your mother would be proud." Layla turned to him, her eyes bright. "I think she is." They stood in silence, listening to the city hum below. The same streets that once broke her now glowed with promise. The same city that stole her dreams had given them back, brighter than before. When she went to bed that night, Layla whispered her usual prayer, one her mother had taught her long ago. "God, thank you for the pain that became purpose, and for the people who showed me mercy when I least deserved it." Outside, the moon rose full and soft over the city, lighting up the world she had once feared. And somewhere in the rhythm of the night, Layla felt her mother's blessing wrap around her again. Warm, forgiving. Years later, Lagos glittered like a different world. The same city that once drowned Layla in tears now carried her name with quiet respect. She was no longer the barefoot girl from Okuru village, hawking sachet water under the sun. She was Layla Raymond, founder of Lightrise Foundation, an organization helping street children go to school. Children just like she once was. The morning light spilled through her office window as she adjusted a photo frame on her desk. Her late mother smiling, wrapped in her old blue wrapper. Beneath it, a simple inscription read, "For Mama, whose faith became my wings." Outside, she could hear the laughter of her two children, David and Amara, playing in the garden while their father, Raymond, watched with a smile. Her heart swelled with gratitude. Every day still felt like grace she didn't deserve. That evening, as rain drizzled gently against the window, the gatekeeper entered the living room, hesitant. "Madam," he said quietly, "there's a woman outside. She says her name is Clementina." Layla froze. For a long time, she didn't move. The name struck like a whisper from a buried past. "Bring her in," she said finally. The door opened, and Clementina stepped inside, thinner, older, her once bright eyes dulled by hardship. The proud Lagos madam was gone. Her wrapper was torn, her steps weak. Behind her, a frail girl clung to her arm, Vivian, coughing softly, her skin pale. "Layla," Clementina's voice broke. She fell to her knees. "Please, forgive me. My daughter is dying. I've sold everything. I came because you are the only one who can help." Layla stood still, her throat tightening. For a moment, the memories flooded back, the hunger, the slaps, the rain. The night she was thrown out like trash, Vivian sank to the floor beside her mother, gasping. "Auntie Layla, please." Raymond stepped beside Layla, placing a calm hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to." But Layla raised her hand gently. Her voice trembled, yet carried strength. "Get up, Auntie. Please." Clementina shook her head, sobbing. "No. Let me kneel. I wronged you. I wronged your mother. I ruined everything." Layla knelt too, facing her. Their eyes met, one filled with guilt, the other with grace. "I forgave you a long time ago," Layla said quietly. "Not for you, but for me. For Mama." Tears streamed down Clementina's face. "Then help my daughter. Please." Layla nodded slowly. "I will." Within hours, Vivian was admitted to the hospital. Layla paid for every test, every treatment. She visited daily, holding Vivian's hand, whispering prayers at her bedside. Sometimes she caught Clementina watching her in silence, her eyes hollow with shame and gratitude. But some things even kindness couldn't undo. Vivian's illness worsened. One morning, the hospital called. She hadn't made it through the night. Clementina wailed like a woman whose heart had finally cracked beyond repair. 2 weeks later, Layla received another call. Clementina too had passed, quietly in her sleep. That evening, Layla stood by her window, watching the city lights shimmer through her tears. Raymond came to her side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "She's gone," he asked softly. Layla nodded. Both of them. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, "I didn't cry for revenge. I cried because I finally understand. Destiny has its own way of settling debts." Raymond pressed his forehead to hers. "And you've settled yours with grace." Weeks later, Layla drove to Okuru village with her children. The roads were still dusty. The air still smelled of firewood and hope. At the edge of the village, she parked near the mango tree where her mother was buried. The children ran ahead, laughing, their small feet kicking up the red dust. Layla walked slowly, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. Kneeling by the grave, she whispered, "Mama, it's me. You're Layla." She smiled through her tears. "I did it, Mama. Just like you said, I waited for God's time." The wind stirred the grass gently, as if the earth itself was answering her. Her daughter, Amara, tugged at her arm. "Mommy, is this where Grandma sleeps?" Layla nodded, brushing a tear away. "Yes, my love. And she's watching over us always." They bowed their heads in a short prayer. The moment was simple but sacred. When Layla rose, Raymond stood waiting by the car, smiling softly. "Ready?" he asked. She looked back one last time at the small mound of red earth, at the memories buried beneath it, and then at the life she had built from its ashes. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." That night, back in Lagos, the family gathered for dinner. Laughter filled the house, bright and alive. Layla looked at her children, then at Raymond, and felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. She thought of Clementina, of Vivian, of the old woman who gave her money in the rain. Every moment, every wound and mercy had led here. As she tucked the children into bed later, she whispered softly, "God never forgets the innocent. And time always delivers justice." Outside, the rain began to fall again, gentle, cleansing, full of promise. And as lightning lit up the sky, Layla stood by the window, smiling through her tears, a woman reborn from pain into purpose, a living testimony that grace always outlives cruelty. What did you get to learn from this story? Kindly drop your thoughts and questions below. Do well to hit the subscribe button to see more emotional and exciting stories like this on Afro Tales by Siri.